Hello and welcome back to another edition of the NHL Play-In Playoff Series on ICU Video. My name is Wyatt Zieger. You can find me on Twitter phonetically at Wyatt Zieger. Joining alongside me is the ever-lovely Brennan Klak. You can find him on Twitter at NHL Update. And Brennan, last time we joined each other, we got to discuss the West. Now we're moving on to the East Series. And I think I'd like to start with the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Montreal Canadiens. Pittsburgh is the 5 seed. They finished the season 40-23-6. Montreal being the 12. We're 31-31-9. This is the one series I look at of all the 8 matchups of the play-ins where I don't think it's really that close, and I'm heavy leaning towards Pittsburgh. Is there anything you could do as far as Montreal goes to change my mind on that?
Not really. I don't think so. But saying that, though, there's probably 2 different things I like about Montreal when it comes to how they could beat Pittsburgh. Number one, Montreal's top line, possession-wise, was one of the best in the league. Tatar and Philippe Deneau and Brendan Gallagher, those 3 guys were fantastic. And Montreal ended up having a bit of a possession lead on Pittsburgh. But still, you got to convert that possession into goals, which Montreal seems to not be able to do year after year since hiring Claude Julien. The other thing that might help Montreal will be if Pittsburgh decides to do something with their lineup on the back end that could help Montreal. And that could mean Matt Murray starting. As Matt Murray, we don't really know what we're going to get out of him. He had a really rough season. It kind of allowed Tristan Jarry to take the reins there, but it looks like Murray might get game 1 against Montreal, so that might help them. And also the bottom pair of Pittsburgh, if they put Jack Johnson and Justin Schultz together, which is a very heavy possibility, I don't like that pairing at all. I think Montreal could have a lot of fun with that. But otherwise, there's a lot of mismatch here.
How much does, for the first time all season, a healthy Penguins squad hurt Montreal's chances?
Well, let's say we just talked about Tatar and Deneau and Gallagher. They might be able to handle one of the Penguins' lines, but let's say they put Gensel with Malkin and Rust. Who's handling that? I mean, Max Domi might not even play, but if he does play, he's not handling that line. Like, that line is a dominant force, and there's no real defensive winger presence on Montreal after that. Drouin's not a very defensive player, and Nick Suzuki's great, but he's a rookie. Like, I don't see how you can put 2 lines together in Montreal to be able to match at least one of Gensel, Malkin, Rust, or Zucker and Crosby and Hornqvist. Like, when you have 2 centers like that are that good, and you finally have all the wingers healthy to bring them over the edge, you actually need to have 2 lines in Montreal to defend it. I don't think they do.
Is it fair when you look at both rosters to say that Carey Price might be the most important player in this series for either team?
He might be, because the Carey Price that we've seen the last 2 or 3 seasons is a good one, but he's not a great one. Like, Carey Price still has it. He still has the mentality to win. He still is a very good goalie. It's just the elite Carey Price we probably haven't seen since 2015, where Montreal is going to need the elite Price in this series, because if Price was to come out and be a dominant force, he could steal them a game. And if you get it to 5 games, then maybe it becomes a lucky bounce type of deal where Montreal can get an upset. But I don't personally see it, just because I think that Price, as good as he is, that defense is still very suspect. Like, Shea Weber and Jeff Petrie are good. Ben Sherrod is decent. Brett Kulak's actually kind of underrated, but it's not a good enough D to hide Montreal's flaws. And therefore, I struggle to see Price being able to be that X factor. I don't know if Montreal has a guy that can be an X factor. Maybe it's Nick Suzuki. I really am high on Nick Suzuki, but trusting a rookie against the Pittsburgh Penguins, I don't know.
It spells disaster to me. Can I get a prediction out of you for the series?
I'm going to say Pittsburgh in 4. I think Montreal gets one luckier game, but even if Murray doesn't stand, let's say Murray sucks, they still have Tristan Jarry, and he had a great season. I don't see them having a hole that's big enough for Montreal to win the series.
I mean, stop me if you've ever heard the story where Pittsburgh goes in with a goaltender and they end up finishing the playoffs with a different one. But I'm going to take Pittsburgh. I'm going to do it in 3. I think even if Carey Price plays out of his mind, they'll probably still lose a 1-0 game. So moving along now, we head over to the Carolina Hurricanes New York Rangers series. Carolina's 6th seed in that. They finished the season 38-25-5. The Rangers were 37-28-5. These teams met 4 times during the regular season. The Rangers getting the better of Carolina every single time. And the Rangers and the Hurricanes, those are 2 teams that play 2 very different styles of hockey.
Yeah, well, I'll speak to that first point. Ask Washington last season what it meant for them to have swept the season series in the regular season, because it didn't mean anything in the playoffs. Now, when I look at Carolina and I look at the Rangers, it's just the Carolina Hurricanes, possession team. They grind on you in the offensive zone. They try to cycle the puck. Guys like Jordan Staal, they're not the greatest goal scorers, but they're going to continue to work hard. Nino Niederreiter is a guy that's in the corner all the time. Aho and Teravainen might be the only 2 guys on Carolina who are always dynamic, but Svechnikov did have a great breakout year where now I think you can trust him as well to break out and make a few plays. The Rangers, they just attack you on the rush. Guys like Panarin and Zibanejad are just quick guys that try to move one end to the other. Adam Fox, who had a great season and might have been a snub for the Calder nomination. That guy just moves the puck extremely well across all the lines and tries to hit Panarin on the rush. That's how the Rangers play. Chris Kreider, speedy guy. Pavel Buchnevich, speedy guy. Ryan Strome, he actually showed a lot of speed this year too, and he kept up with that line. So it's a rush team versus a team that tries to keep the puck all the time. Will the shots be 35-15? Maybe. But the Rangers might only need 15 shots to score the 3 goals to win the game.
And that was one of the problems that the Rangers had this year with shot suppression. They averaged, I think, the third worst at allowing shots in the league. So Carolina may not be a team that scores on a lot of their chances, but if they're going to get a bevy of chances against this Rangers team, then we could see that playing out in their favor. But when I look at the Rangers squad and you look at Panarin and Zibanejad and Strome, Buchnevich, and you go down the list, these are some very proven players in Panarin and Zibanejad, and I think that scoring punch is going to be just a little too much for the Hurricanes, especially when you look at net, and they have a bit of a dilemma where you either go with Reimer or Mrazek, and neither option is really that wonderful. I mean, Reimer had some slightly better numbers than Mrazek this year, but I don't think either one of those goaltenders are going to be good enough to steal a game that might head up into the 4-3, 5-4 kind of score.
That is Carolina's biggest problem. It's Peter Mrazek is just average. Like sometimes Mrazek makes an incredible save and sometimes he lets in a goal. It's like, and Reimer has playoff experience, but James Reimer also hasn't really been a playoff starter since the Leafs.
If Leaf fans remember that Bruins game.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of the toss up because the Rangers, they've got arguably 3 guys that can come in and play very well because Igor Shesterkin was excellent to end the season. Georgiev had a lot of really nice moments. And then Henrik Lundqvist actually had a winning record against Carolina this year. He was excellent versus the Canes. So the Rangers have some tough decisions to make, whether they go with Shesterkin or the King or Georgiev even for a game, maybe as their exhibition starter. We'll see what happens there. But a big difference for me and why I'm picking Carolina to win this series is the defense. Because Dougie Hamilton is back. And yes, Brett Pesce, who is a Wyatt Zieger lookalike to me, Brett Pesce being out is going to hurt. But Slavin and Hamilton, those 2 guys are just the 2 guys I might want on my pairing in the league together. Like they gel so well. Slavin's so good with his stick. He's a defensive force. Dougie Hamilton had 40 points before he went down this year. He was plus 30 in like 47 games. A ridiculous season for Dougie. Whereas I look at the Rangers and it's like, okay, who's the defensive presence here? Like Jacob Trouba had a rough season and Adam Fox and Anthony DeAngelo, as fun as they are, like I'm not trusting DeAngelo very much defensively. And it showed on the penalty kill because the Rangers penalty kill was abysmal this season. Carolina's power play was actually pretty good. That could be a problem, especially the Rangers bottom 6 taking penalties. Brendan Lemieux, get out of the box because the moment he's in the box, I think Carolina is going to totally capitalize there.
Do you have a prediction for the series?
Yeah, I'll go Carolina in 5 because I do think the Rangers goaltending is going to win them a game, and I do think Panarin is extremely hard to stop. But Carolina's possession is just too much, and I also think their depth up front is too much. The Rangers' bottom 6 doesn't inspire me at all. It's got a bunch of guys that wouldn't make other rosters, and no offense to Capo Caco, but that was not the greatest rookie season to have. He just struggled. So if Carolina can shut down even one Ranger line, they have enough throughout the rest of the lineup that I think it's going to be easy for them to win that series if they can contain Panarin or Zibanejad.
I think this is probably one of the tightest series that we're going to see in the play-in. I think Carolina finds a way to steal a couple of games, but I think New York simply just outchances the Hurricanes, and I think they take it in 5. Switching up now, it's the New York Islanders versus the Florida Panthers. New York was 35-23-10 this season. Panthers 35-26-8. These teams met 3 times during the regular season, and the Islanders take the best of that. 2 wins in that, one of those in the shootout. When you look at these 2 teams, at least what stands out for me is the goals for and the goals against. The Panthers were a team that scored some of the most in the NHL this year, 228, but they also let in 224. And when you look at the flip side of that with the Islanders, they hardly let in any goals at 190, but they only scored 189 themselves. Which way do you see this going? Is it going to be a goal-scoring series that sees the Panthers blow out the Islanders, or is this going to be 2-1 hockey where the Islanders seem to squeak past the Panthers?
Well, that's a great question because the New York Islanders know how to play boring defensive shutdown hockey. Like Matt Barzal is a really weird fit for New York because other than Barzal, there's not a lot of guys that really make you jump out of your seat. They're just kind of workhorse players like Anders Lee, Jordan Eberle in the kind of the twilight of his career, like in his peak-ish level, is not as exciting as he was as an Oiler. And Brock Nelson is like the prototypical average number 2C. Like the Islanders just don't inspire fun. And that's also Barry Trotz's coaching style. Barry Trotz is like a guy who, him and Mitch Korn say, goaltenders, you're carrying, and we're going to have a defensive system that allows you guys to be the best you can possibly be. Guys like Semyon Varlamov, Thomas Greiss, and in the past, Robin Lehner, like they have a lot of shelter because of the way that they play the game. But Florida is going to be really tough to contain because of that top line. Guys, like I don't think Barkov and Huberdeau are going to have a quiet series because they're just too good to not break through that Islanders defense. Like the Islanders don't have a good enough tandem or core to completely shut them down. So for me, it becomes, okay, who are the X factors up front? Maybe Mike Hoffman and Evgeny Dadonov, because they have a chance to play the even lesser competition, maybe against a guy like Nick Leddy or Johnny Boychuk. Both guys had a veteran leadership out the wazoo, obviously, with Boychuk, but they weren't as good as they should be this season. And those 2 guys are snipers. So they might be the 2 guys that really have to break through that tight Islanders core.
Neither team has a player that scored 30 goals on the season. One of them that would have counted towards last year is Vincent Trochek, formerly of the Panthers. How much are they going to miss him in this series?
Well, if you ask Panthers fans, Trochek was kind of a maddeningly inconsistent guy. Like he was a guy that tried too much, tried to work too hard, and part of that might have been because of the injuries, and Carolina believes that they can get Trochek back at his regular level. They replaced him with Eric Haula. Eric Haula, not a bad player himself, but also a guy who struggled a little bit in Carolina, got scratched a couple times. They might miss Trochek's speed because to me, that's a big element as to why he's an important player, is that he's an energetic kind of water bug-like guy. But overall, I think the thing that Florida is missing the most is going to be defensive structure and the goaltending that they wanted to get out of Bobrovsky. And I guess that's going to lead us to our next topic.
Well, I mean, Florida threw an actual boat filled with cash at Bobrovsky this offseason, $10 million a year. And what that got them was a .323 goals against average and a .900 save percentage. I mean, I'll get a prediction from you after this, but the way I see this series going is if Bobrovsky is going to be the best player in the series, that's the way the Panthers win. I think Barkov and Huberdeau are going to be very, very hard to shut down. I don't think New York has the defenseman to be able to contain them. But if Bobrovsky showed what he showed during the regular season, I think the Panthers sink. So I will take the Panthers to win this one in 5, but that's only if Sergei Bobrovsky can get back to some semblance of what he was 2 years ago.
And I'll give Bobrovsky some credit because the Islanders at least have Adam Pelech and Ryan Pulock and Devin Tays, and I think that there is value with those guys. They're all able to play in that system and have success. Whereas I look at Florida's D, Aaron Ekblad had a great season, but outside of Ekblad, like, and Mackenzie Weegar is actually very underrated, but Keith Yandel, Mike Matheson, Mark Pysyk played forward. Like,
he scored a hat trick.
Anton Solomon Boulder. Yeah, it's just Bobrovsky didn't have a lot of help, but he also is supposed to not need as much help because he's paid $10 million to be a goalie that saves you consistently. So I agree with you. I think Florida in 5 if Bobrovsky finds his game. But if he sucks early, the Islanders could do what they did to Pittsburgh last year and sweep.
I mean, anything is possible, especially in these playoffs. And as we know, a hot goaltender can steal you around. Moving on to our last round of the play-ins here, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Columbus Blue Jackets. Toronto this year, 36-25-9. That was good for the 8th seed. Columbus, 33-22-15. That was good enough for the 9 seed. Toronto, yet again, this is kind of the same story as the Panthers-Islanders series. The Toronto Maple Leafs, they're a team that scores a lot of goals, but they have some troubles keeping them out of their own net. And then Columbus, they don't score a lot of goals, but they also don't let a lot in either. What do you see? How do you see this series playing out offensively for the Maple Leafs?
Well, Toronto's going to score goals. They have way too much talent to not score something. Like, even if Matthews goes cold, there's still Marner. If he goes cold, there's Nylander. There's Tavares. There's just so much talent on Toronto that I can't see them like not scoring. And I look at Columbus, and it's a bit difficult because they had a great stretch to get here. They had all those injuries and guys just kept coming in that we didn't even know their names. Like Kevin Stenlund was good. Nathan Gerby was back in the league. It's like, how are these guys coming out of the woodwork like this? And it's because Elvis Merzlikins and Joonas Korpisalo were really, really good. And especially Merzlikins, who really took the reins there for Columbus near the end. But can we trust them? Like, that's the big thing, is how much can we trust those two guys? They both don't have much of a track record. Korpisalo has a little bit more of one, but they're very raw with no playoff experience, to say the least. So that's the thing, is that facing Toronto sharpshooters when you have no experience in a playoff setting, and Toronto, like, yes, there's a lot of negative emotion towards them, but they keep losing to Boston. Well, it's not like Boston's a bad team. And all those series go to 7. So Columbus, I think, is a reduced version of Boston to a very strong degree, to where Toronto will find it a little easier.
Head coach John Tortorella nominated for the Jack Adams. When I look down at the teams, when it's forwards, defense, goaltending, special teams, the only real advantage I can pull out for Columbus is their coaching. But how much of a difference can he make from the bench?
Well, he can make a big one with who he decides to match up against, Matthews versus Tavares, because Columbus does have a nice defensive core to match up with. I mean, Seth Jones and Zach Werenski together, great, but maybe you want to separate them a little bit depending on how you want to line match this. I mean, Ryan Murray can also play good minutes. Gavrikov is a quite underrated defensive defenseman. He played quite well coming over to North America. So they have options there. And Tortorella's won the cup before. He knows the defensive structure necessary to hold shots, the shots against lower. So Tortorella is going to be a big X factor in this series. But I actually look at Toronto's side, and I wonder how they're going to try to shut down some of Columbus's forwards. Because Oliver Bjorkstrand, boy, is he underrated. He's really fun to watch. Pierre-Luc Dubois, not practicing 100% right now, but I'm sure when this video comes to the forefront here, Dubois is going to be a huge force for Columbus. And Toronto's defense, like, that's the one thing, is that I trust Anderson, but who do you trust on Toronto's defense other than Muzzin and Riley?
I mean, you look at Tyson Barrie and the points he put up, but points doesn't necessarily reflect a defensive style of play. And then you go down, it's Travis, Dermott, and then a bunch of guys that you wouldn't want to put in an NHL lineup today. So, I mean, defense is obviously the Achilles heels for Toronto, but I still have them winning this series, and I think they're going to do so heavy-handedly, probably in 3 games. I'm calling a sweep of the Blue Jackets. What do you have?
No, I like Justin Hall as well in Toronto on their blue line, and they have potential with Rasmus Sandin, but that blue line to me is why Columbus is going to make this a tight series, because John Tortorella is going to aggressively attack those guys. He's going to tell all of his players on Columbus to be physical and to take them out of the game from that front, and also attack Muzzin and Riley, like make them physically wear down, because they're going to play giant minutes in the series. But Toronto's offensive ability is too much for me. And the uncertainty of the Columbus blue line, or the Columbus goaltending to me, that uncertainty makes me really uneasy about picking against Toronto. Because as much as those guys were good, I just don't know what they're going to do. And I'm pretty sure that Anderson's going to have a nice series, because he is usually Toronto's best player in the playoffs.
I mean, this could be the year that the Maple Leafs finally get over that hump. Do you have a prediction?
I'm going to go Leafs in 5.
Leafs in 5. All right. So we both got the Leafs, and that'll do it for today. Thanks once again, Brennan. This has been an awesome time. And thanks to everybody watching. This is an ICU Video Productions Procast, and we'll see you next time.